Hi, I'm Emily Blackwell, and I will be doing my presentation on Beatrix Potter. So, Beatrix Potter grew up in a household with a parent who studies science and a parent who studies the arts. And so, this mix of household was believed to contribute to her drive for studying and sketching flora and fauna that she would find around her house. And as she would sketch and paint all the creatures around her home, including her own pets, she was then sent to study at the National Art Training School. However, overall, Beatrix Potter was self-taught, and she took a lot of inspiration from the works of John Constable, Thomas Gainsborough, and J.M.W. Turner. And here we have examples of things that she would take inspiration of. At least from what I see, the cottage in a cornfield and the view of the Avon Gorge are very similar styles as to how she would do her backgrounds in nature, and the drawing of the study of a sheep is very similar in style as to how she would draw her animals. So, as she continued to do her art and sketching, she decided that she wanted to try to do scientific illustrations. Specifically, she wanted to post a book about fungi. However, her work was refused. She kept doing her sketches, her paintings, and one day she had sent a letter to a friend. She didn't know what quite to say to them, so instead she told them a little story about a little rabbit named Peter. And this became her start of creating short stories about little creatures, such as Peter Rabbit. So, her drawings tend to use the materials of an ink pen, watercolors, and ink washes. And this piece right here, the veal and the ham pie, is a very good example of how she utilizes all of these materials. Sadly, this piece isn't finished. However, if you look at the flora, the way that she inks that is a very common way of her doing it to make the foliage look lush and full, and the way that she details the building, also very similar. You'll see throughout all of her work, and the way she does her backgrounds. So whenever you look at her sketches and studies, she tends to do the style of using many tiny thin lines in order to create her forms and her values. So here on the rabbit you see that she layers many lines in order to create those deeper values. However, with the field mice, she still uses the thin lines in order to create the shape of the mouse, but she then uses the ink wash in order to create the values that she needs. Now, watercolors, she uses those overall to create a dimension to her form. For example, the lily pads, she uses her watercolors, layering them where they need to be a deeper, darker color, and then leaving them with one layer in order to show like a ridge or a bump that would catch the light, thus creating a full form, a full lily pad that you can see that I mentioned in. And then you look on the right with her bees and insects. These are completely done by sketching in watercolor in order to create the illusion that they look like pinned insects. The values and the layering that she does with the watercolors gives them that lifelike form. Now, continuing with her watercolors, she uses only watercolor in order to do her landscapes. And I feel by doing that, she's able to create the illusion that these forms are much further away from us than they really are, just on a paper. And so what she tends to do with landscapes is that she chooses much muter, lighter tones, still quite vibrant, but in a way very soft, which creates this very light atmosphere to them. Now, for her ink drawings, she does a variety of different ones. Particularly, she'll do ink drawings where her drawing values are determined by the layering of lines, kind of like hashing. Particularly, you can see this on her left drawing with the mice with their fur. To make it darker, she adds extra lines there in order to create that value. And you also see that with the plant, particularly on the leaves, the one closest to us in the foreground. And then you have her other style on the right, where she uses the line weight in order to give us the dimension and like how close the image is to us. So for example, on the bushes, she uses the heavy, thick forms on her lines in order to show us that there's a lot of dense foliage there. And if you look at the path, you can see how closer to us the lines to indicate grass are much thicker. And as the road, this little path, gets narrower and further away from us, the lines for the grass to indicate where it is also get thinner to the point where they disappear, giving us the illusion that the image is going away from us. And so if you apply all of this together, you have images such as these. So on the left, she uses the technique where she does small, thin lines. She doesn't quite, in this one, layer them in order to show the volume or like the value. However, she does use her watercolors in order to show us the differing values of shadow and light. And she uses her objects, her forms of the rabbit, the lady rabbit, and the gentleman in order to give us another step into the dimensions and perspective in this image, where we have the lady rabbit walking towards us, and we have the gentleman rabbit who should be about the same size as her, but he is walking away, so he is made a bit smaller. And the way that she draws the buildings gives us a good idea of what our perspective in this image would be. And then we have on the right where she uses her light, muted tones and only watercolor in the background to give us the illusion that that is much further away from us, as she creates a much stronger, more saturated foreground with the inking in order to give us more defined and definite forms and shapes, much more clear, with the thick lines to show what's closer and more dense, and the thin lines in order to show us what's much further away. Both of these works have the styles that she does, but also just applied them in different ways, which makes them really fun and nice to look at. So, that was my presentation on Beatrix Potter. I had a fun time pulling this all together. I've grown up with her work, and I hope that after this presentation, you guys also enjoy her work as well. Thank you.